Welcome to the Woolly World of Westknits, episode 2. We have Brioche and Stitch in the house today, so we're going to go over some new PUPDATEs, some finished objects, and a new work in progress in this episode. You're going to get a sneak peek of a new shawl that I'm working on, and we'll also take a look at some new patterns that just came out, and I'll answer some of your questions from the last video. So grab some knitting and enjoy this fun episode where we can just chat all about knitting and catch up on what's going on in the woolly world of Westknits. I got really inspired this last week to cast on a surprise, another shawl, because you can never have too many shawls. I honestly think I've made over 1,000 shawls and I'm not done. So I've been knitting shawls for like 14 years now, and some of the shawls used to be really small. I'm going to show you a tiny shawl later that I made like 12 years ago. But the shawls are getting big now, and I got inspired because I have a lot of fingering weight yarn lying around my stash, and I like to organize my yarn just by yarn weight and then by color. So I've just got all these like color palettes and buckets and bags lying around my studio. And so I just put a scrappy stash busty palette together, and I love the springy summer sherbety color palettes because I've really been working with saturated color pops a lot lately. And I'm sure like you do, you also go through these like color moods, or maybe you just knit like 50 pink shawls or whatever. But I like to try all the colors, and I've been doing lots of saturated colors, so I wanted something really kind of more pastel-y and spring and soft, so there's no dark colors in this. And I'm just grabbing random colors from my stash. And I thought I would cast on just trying some different stitches and stitch combinations that I haven't tried before. And then as I'm knitting, I'm making up the textures as I go. But once I started going, it got really fun, and I started writing down the pattern. And so this is going to become a pattern later this year. So this is your first sneak peek of it. But this is how I design a lot of my shawls, is I just grab and go and make things up along the way. So I don't know exactly what's going to happen in the border, but these are how my favorite patterns start, is with the unknown and with the thrill of knitting without, knowing what the final size or even stitch is going to be next. So some of my favorite patterns I designed with this kind of improvisational method are the ones like Fantastitch. So I've been channeling that Fantastitch spirit with this new shawl, but it's more holy. So I'm kind of I want a sister shawl for Fantastitch, but with more eyelets. Are you on board with that? I don't do a lot of lace, but I love eyelets, which is lace. Is it the same thing? I think so. I guess I love lace. So you're going to get this pattern later this year, and I'm just having so much fun trying a few new stitches and bringing back a couple of my favorites from previous patterns. And that's something I like to do in my design process in general, is recycling stitches and ideas and mixing them up in a new way. And then I find that relieves like pressure to always come up with something brand new. But when you put something in a different orientation or expand upon an idea you've played with before, you start to like make this familiar vocabulary in your knitting. So if you're another designer that likes to make things up and make up your own designs, I always encourage to reuse and recycle your ideas. And don't feel like you have to do a brand new style every single time. Because just inherently, by mixing up the colors and playing upon those stitch variations, it's going to flow into a new thing gradually, rather than forcing things to be so inventive and brand new. And I don't believe in all that. I think everything's been done before, and it's just your own interpretation and your own variation of those things. So I'm playing with some eyelets, some basket weave. I've seen this stitch come up in a lot of sweaters and some shawls that I've been inspired by. So I want to do this like basket stitch and maybe expand upon that idea and mix knits and purls with eyelets. And that crisscross is coming back from the shawlography. I loved that technique from last year's mystery knit along, so I'm going to reuse that. And I think I've done enough stuff. It's starting to get kind of chaotic, so now I'm going to start repeating some of those textures and see where it goes. So I'm knitting a stash busty version, and I'm sure I'll finish this and photograph it. Now that I've shown it to you, I have to finish this. I can't just throw this into the work in progress pile, which we should do a tour of sometime. Would you like to see that? Like a work in progress tour? And we can like abandon and rip out those old whips and then rescue some other whips and finish them off. That could be really fun. I don't know. It might be a little overwhelming. I've cast on a lot of things, but this one I'm determined to finish. And lately I've been kind of proud at how monogamous I've been with my knitting. So I haven't cast on 10 things this week. I've only cast on 2 things this week. So yeah, that's the new shawl, and I can't wait to finish that up and turn that into a design for you. This has been a really busy week for some new patterns, so I hope I'm not overwhelming you with things to choose from, but you don't have to knit everything, okay? Just knit almost everything. If you're like me, you have like all these cravings for different types of projects. So some are really simple, some are those colorwork projects, sometimes you have your little like socks or small shawl projects. One of my cravings is always to have something garter stitch on the needles. So I wanted to give you another garter stitch, expansive, easy, flowy project called Garter Abyss. And this just came out and it is such a cool shape. Some of you might recognize it. Have you seen this shape before? Any of you diehard West knitters? Do you know what it is? It's from like 8 or 9 years ago, this slip stitch shawl called Geyser Stretch. I played with these asymmetrical increases, but that pattern was a little more graphic with DK weight yarn. So I wanted to take that shaping idea and give you a 5 skein fade, beautiful asymmetric garter stitch shawl. This was one of the easiest shawls I've designed this year because all you have to do to knit it is knit it. There's no purls, there's no I-cords even. I know, I didn't put I-cords on the edges. I just did a little garter stitch back to my roots, eyelets, make the little increase spirals, and you just keep knitting until it's the size you want. So I gave you all these like repeats to do in the pattern, and there's all these stitch counts that you get to after each repeat. And whenever you're like, oh my gosh, Stephen, I can't fit my stitches on my needle anymore, then it's time to bind off. That's when you know the shawl is the right size, is when you can't fit any more stitches on your circular needle. I know you've knit a project like that. It's probably a Westknits shawl, and you probably cursed at me while you were doing that I-cord bind off. You're welcome. That means it's gonna be a beautiful schlanket. So this is called Garter Abyss, 5 skeins of La Bien-Aimée Super Sock. And I really like that yarn base because it doesn't pill a lot. I have all these super sock shawls that just last forever because they have nylon in them. And you get really crisp stitches, and it's a really drapey, plied, superwash merino. So Garter Abyss, we have lots of kits for this shawl at Stephen and Penelope. I hope we still have kits. So check that out at Stephen and Penelope and see if you have a color palette that you like. And if not, you can always email us at info@stephenandpenelope.com. And we love putting palettes together from our yarn shop here in Amsterdam. But I'm really happy with this. It's one of those top-down shawls that you just keep increasing and building it. And it just grows and grows and grows. And it's really fun to throw around and swirl and dance in for a nice spring summer shawl. If you are in the yarn along, then you may have cast on this striped Vortex shawl. This has a really cool construction, and it just came out for the Yarn Along Club. There may still be a few Yarn Along spots available, so you can check that out at Stephen and Penelope, but we're gonna do the Yarn Along again next year with new designs. So if you're missing out and loving all the colors and designs you're seeing for this summer's Westknits Club, we're gonna do it again next year. And this pattern will become available in November. So if you're not in the Yarn Along, we do release the patterns 6 months after they come out. So this is a little preview for you if you want to knit this shawl later in the winter. But yeah, Striped Vortex came out for the Yarn Along, and it was a really fun one to come up with, focused on like geometric details. And I've always wanted to do like a center out style of shawl. So this is an unusual construction that starts in the center, and then you build the wingtips, pick up and knit the border, and you have all of these cascading angles. And that's just a recurring theme in a lot of my designs. I love when color meets architecture, and the shape and the construction of the shawl like transforms the color relationship, and it just makes this kind of magnetic song in a shawl. Very poetic, right? So a striped vortex with 3 colors. It's not too big, not too small. So if you're casting on this for the yarn along, just give it a little patience in the beginning. It's a really small beginning with a little center out cast on. And I use this method called Emily Ocker's circular cast on, but you could also just do a long tail cast on. So it doesn't really matter, but have some patience in the center. And I use the magic loop method, making these center out shawls, but you can also put those on DPNs. But I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't own DPNs. Does that mean I'm still a knitter? I used to have DPNs, but then I didn't use them as much. I feel like I would always lose one, and then I got frustrated when I only had like 3 DPNs. I don't know. I'm a magic loop knitter, so let me know. You can comment down below if you're ashamed that I don't do DPNs. Are you on Team DPNs, or are you on Team Circs? Team Circulars? I'm definitely on the circular side, because you just need 1 needle and you can do everything with it. But striped vortex, I can't wait to see your progress with that if you're in the yarn along, and otherwise it's coming in November. All right, the last new pattern we have is a big blanket. I told y'all that I'm gonna be doing a lot of sweaters and blankets this year, and this is one of my favorites this year just because of the colors and the brick stitch. I'm obsessed with it. I just need everything in this brick slip stitch pattern. So I designed this really simple rectangular blanket, and this is the big couch size, the large size, and there's a baby size in the pattern too. So can you imagine a little baby swaddled in bricks? That will be so cute. And you can use your DK weight stash. So all those sizing and yarn requirements are in the Painting Bricks blanket pattern, but this would make a really cute little baby gift for those spring babies popping out. But this is the large size. I always make the large size. This one, actually, my friend made in Iceland. So I can't take credit for this blanket, but I can take credit for the colors. I sent her all these colors, and I was just so happy with how they turned out, because you get these color pops from the contrast colors, and the main color also changes. So in most of my other blankets, I use 1 main color throughout, like the Painting Honeycombs blanket. But this one I wanted to just be extra random, and that kind of blanket that I'll always have in my living room, that's just that kind of heirloom, scrappy, filled with memories type of blanket. So there's all these leftovers from like the hybrid knitting shawls, leftover West wool, there's some Walk collection, marled yarn, some spin cycle in there. And that main color, I started really light, so it's really silver in the beginning, and then the main color gets into the medium grays, this like lichen, khaki green color, and then the main color eventually transitions into charcoal and like dark heathered tweedy gray. And there's even some rows, I mean, I'm not gonna show you too close, but just trust me that there's color changes like halfway through the row sometimes. And it's okay to do that, okay? When you're knitting these scrappy big projects, you don't even have to wait till you finish like a color stripe to use the next color. Just when you run out of yarn, grab a new color and just say yes, don't stress, and let it be all about stash busting and mixing up your DK and worsted weight yarns. So that's the Painting Bricks blanket, and I'm really excited to see kind of what color palettes you come up with for this big blanket. Okay, for this next section, we have some new FOs, some new finished objects, and I might need some modeling help. Brioche, Stitch, are you gonna help me model? So I've been filming the Penguino workshop, like I told you all about in the last episode. It'll probably come out later this summer, but I just finished this cute little Penguino, this mini version, and I think Brioche is gonna look really handsome in it. This is his life. You get treats and I get modeling, okay? Did I make this big enough for you? It was probably big enough for him last week, but somebody thinks eating is an Olympic sport. Oh my gosh. Okay, this is my brioche baby. Look at that, he's wearing the Penguino. So I just finished knitting this Penguino jacket. This is the second size in the Penguino pattern. Oh my gosh. So if it just has like a little clasp, a little button, it's gonna stay on. Oh, he would seriously just sleep in this. He loves sweaters and knits because he's the lazy one, and Stitch is the little feisty one trying to bite his head off. So she would need like a zipper, or she would need this like super glued to her. But yeah, toddler, just so you know, the toddler size, the second size of Penguino, is a good 1 year Frenchie size. Oh my gosh, I'm so happy. Oh, I had no idea when I was designing this Penguino that I'd have this little Frenchie in my life. So there has to be a dog collection. I saw all your comments from the last episode, and you posted a lot of different dogs that you have, and a lot of you commented that you have big dogs that need to stay warm. So I'm gonna spend some time working on some big sizes for that brioche jacket, or that brioche sweater I showed you in the last episode. Oh my gosh. But who knew? Basically, I already have a dog pattern out there. You can knit the little Penguino. Oh, look at those welts. If he wasn't chubby and thick enough, that welt just adds some extra texture. Are you happy, Brioche? Yeah, he's like, I just want to sleep. Okay, thank you. So I finished that Penguino for the workshop. He's just going to sit down and sleep in it. That is so cute. And I made the big one for myself, too, because I've made 4 Penguinos, I think, since I designed this pattern. But I gave one to a friend. The original one I sold in like a sample sale like years and years ago. That's like one that I regret. I don't regret it. The knitter was so happy and she loves it. And then I made one, I think is in Iceland, this like pastel neon one. And then this is the most recent one with all these moody, murky colors. And it was all stash. And I'm really proud that I actually knit this big Penguino completely from stash. Not like other times when I say it's a stash buster and sometimes I just buy new yarn. But as soon as you wind yarn, it's stash. That's what I believe. So even if you go out and buy yarn for a Penguino, as soon as it's wound into a ball, it's just leftover stash, okay? But I was proud. I only used my leftovers, and I'm really happy with the neutrals and the color pops in this jacket. So I mixed lots of kind of moody, woolly, non-superwash wools, and then I add some marled yarns and mohair and alpaca. And it's really just all about mixing different weights and different fibers and not worrying about things being perfect. So again, I make up the colors as I go, but when I'm doing that, I'm working with a mood. So I'm improvising, but I'm also not just going totally random and wild. I'm like improvising with a vision and knowing that I want it to be this certain mood and giving space for the neutrals to melt and change. And then when you work with those neutrals, that's a calm section. So then the bright colors really get to flash and pop out. And one of my favorite things about the Penguino is it's reversible. So when you wear it upside down, then you get a little more a penguin style with those arms lower and this big dramatic collar. This is the evening version for lounging and knitting with your pups. So this workshop is coming soon later this summer, but the patterns for these are already out. And this is definitely, I think, my #1 favorite design, I think. Is it? Fantastic. I really love the painting bricks. Vertices Unite is, maybe that's #3. I don't know. Do you have a favorite Westknits? Yeah, if you have a favorite one, yeah, feel free to comment. I'm real curious. Sometimes there's real common ones, but sometimes you surprise me with your favorite ones. They might be an older pattern or some with really funky construction, but I'm gonna commit to my answer. Yeah, Penguino, yeah, definitely is my favorite. Basically because every time someone makes the Penguino, it's totally different and unlike any other one that's been made, because it really forces you to use your stash, and it really represents your own color choices and style, and it reveals what kind of colors and yarns you like. So yeah, I really like kind of how much of a chameleon of a pattern the Penguino is. And that's why I like it. I get really inspired by everybody's color palettes. So if you've made one, feel free to tag me on Instagram or on Ravelry. And if you haven't made one yet, you can wait this summer. Maybe we should do like a little Penguino knit along for the summer when the workshop comes out. What do you think? But Penguino, yeah, I can't wait to share that workshop with you soon. I got a lot of really good questions from the first episode, so I'd like to take a moment and do this Q&A session. So if you have any other questions that are burning, you can ask those down below, and I'll pick a few of those each episode. But Sarah Jameson asks, how do I avoid my mohair dare turning into a mohair scare? So mohair dares are, I do those during the MCAL, the mystery seasons, where I challenge you and dare you to incorporate mohair into your shawl, even if a pattern doesn't say to use mohair. But that can be scary because what do you do with it? Is it gonna just become a fluffy, like rabbit, or mohair's not rabbits, fluffy goat? Is a fluffy goat just gonna like cause chaos into your shawl? I think the solution for transforming a dare into keeping a dare from becoming a scare is to just use it a little bit here and there. Okay, that was a really long way to get to an answer. Basically, just use a little mohair pop and like don't do a whole mohair all over your project. So whenever you use something in like a really small percentage, just as a little stripe or as like a little mohair accent, that's the like gateway into welcoming that fiber into your life. So if you have, this works for colors too. If you have a color you don't like, or you're like, ooh, Steven loves yellow, I'm intimidated by it, but I'm intrigued at the same time, just do like a little pop. So invite it into your life in small doses is the short answer to this long answer. Thank you, Sarah. I got a really good question from Strickalog, and they say, I have lanolin and fiber allergies and would love to hear about if you have any advice on how to choose safer fibers to try. I'm not sure if that would interest you. It does interest me. But it would be really interesting to just know more about how fibers like silk and llama impact the fabric. Okay, that's cool. If you're allergic to wool, but you can do llama, awesome. That's like another protein fiber, and it's really warm and kind of that woolly feeling as well. So yeah, a good substitute for wool can be alpaca, llama fibers. They're a little more drapey for sure, but a lot of you can do no wool. And I know some of you are in like really warm climates, and I knit with wool all the time because you need it here in Amsterdam. It's like constantly chilly sweater weather. But whenever you're using a finer fiber or like a more slinky fiber like silk, cotton, llama, alpaca, they're more drapey, just use them for the shawls. Like if I use wool, use the substitute fiber like cotton or silk, but maybe go down a needle size. So what I find when I'm knitting with those drapey fibers is that it can get more loose and holy and open, because a lot of my fabrics are architectural with slip stitches, and the wool gives such good body to the fabric. But with cotton and silk, they're much more loose and flowy. So I would say substitute those fibers freely, especially for the shawls, but try just going down 1 or maybe even 2 needle sizes from the recommended needle in my patterns. And that's going to give you a crisper fabric and a piece that's not going to grow too much and look so sloppy. So I like the fabrics that are tidy and crisp, but not too tight. Not cardboard, but not like a wholly drapey mess. It's got to be crispy, but still drapey. Kelly Rathman commented, I love seeing your older designs, and I'd love to hear you talk more about them. So Kelly, I dove into my yarn cabinet, one of my shawl cabinets, and I dug out one of my oldest shawls that I could find called the Herbivore, and maybe I should do this, maybe not every episode, but I'll do this more often. I'll like dig out these old projects that have been hiding in my shawl cabinets. And can you believe how small this is? So this is one of the very first shawl designs I made called Herbivore. It was a 1 skein shawl, and this must have shrunk, I feel. I don't know. I can't imagine knitting a shawl so small, because my shawls now are like 4 or 5 skeins, and I'm big. I'm 6'2", and I made all these I called them man kerchiefs or like man shawls, malls. I don't know what I was thinking, but I'm like, I'm gonna make these rustic, tough man kerchiefs. And that's how I started designing shawls. And they were just with 1 skein, but they're so tiny. This was with 1 skein of hand-dyed yarn, and I really loved this construction because this was a really improvisational process. When I was designing a lot of my first patterns, I didn't know much about shaping, so I would just try different things and see what happened. So when I was knitting this Herbivore shawl, I was making a triangle, and I was like, oh, this is so different. I'm putting twisted stitches instead of regular knit stitches. I'm like, ooh, that's really fun and different. And whenever I got bored of that, I just added these extra increases at the edge, and it exploded the wingspan shape, and you got a new shawl shape. And I didn't even know what kind of shape that I would get when I blocked my shawl, but I was just like, ooh, that's fun. I'm doing more yarn overs, and I'm getting these extra angles. That's so fun. I was just making it up as I went, and I wrote down the pattern and was so surprised with the ending shape, because when you put it on your shoulders, it just like curves around easily and doesn't fly away. And this was about 12 years ago, when shawls were basically just triangles, semicircles, and rectangles. There wasn't as much crazy experimental shaping going on. And when I started doing this, for me, it just like unlocked all these possibilities that a shawl could be anything really. So this is a really special design to me, because it really marks that kind of pivot point between holding on to these traditional ideas of what things have to be and how you can make them, and letting it become whatever it is that you make them. And that's just a common theme in my knitting and in life too, I guess. It's not about how you're supposed to do things and what kind of path you're supposed to follow in life, but you can really manipulate and make your own path. So that's what I do with my designs, and it's led to a lot of shawls and a lot of funky construction techniques. And then this is a new Herbivore knit with 2 skeins. Okay, this is more proportional to my size now. So you can knit the Herbivore as big as you want. So if you want to do it with 2 or 3 skeins, this is with La Bien-Aimé's Merino Sport yarn, but you could use any fingering weight yarn, or I saw someone do a chunky weight version of Herbivore, and that was really structural. But yeah, take these early ideas and you can expand upon them by just continuing the increases and using more yarn. Leslie Gold asks, I'm always curious to see what the reverse side of your knitting looks like. So I'll just show you a couple. So the reverse side of a lot of these slip stitch patterns is actually really cool, because you see more contrast colors. So this is the bricks on the front, and this is the bricks on the back. So I always think of things as having the right side as what I'm going to use the most, but I do think about, making sure that the wrong side isn't a total hot mess. But I really like the reverse side of these slip stitch patterns, because you see more of the contrast color and it gets more saturated there. And you see all the ends, but you don't see them too much. They just poke out a teeny bit. But whenever I'm weaving in my ends, my go-to way is the weave-in Steven. And I'll link to that technique video down below. If you haven't done the weave-in Steven, your life is going to be changed, okay? It's a way of working in your yarn tails as you knit, so you don't have to sew in any ends to your project. So that's on the wrong side. All those little tails are whipped in as you knit using that weave-in Steven technique. What else? The Herbivore, this looks just like the same on the wrong side. It's just stockinette and twisted stitches, so it looks a little more bumpy on the wrong side, but it's a solid shawl, so it just looks like a solid shawl. I don't knit many solid shawls. I actually just cast on a solid shawl. So you gotta be careful. Whenever I say I don't like something, then you're gonna see me do it like the next week, because I like contradicting myself and, I don't know, kind of challenging. Whenever you find yourself into these color moods or these color habits, I like to break them and, do the opposite. I don't like to always feel so predictable with my knitting. I don't know if you do that too, but it can feel like really safe to knit with the same thing over and over again, the same colors, the same techniques. But for me, it just gets boring. I like the element of surprise with knitting. And let me just show you real quick the inside of my Penguino. So revealing, showing you the insides of all my jackets and shawls. Not too bad, the little ends poke out here and there. But I really love the insides of the projects, especially these modular ones, because you really get to see those construction pickups and details, and it just looks more gritty and, more raw. And I really like that as well, seeing those selvage details. I love a good selvage. That's one of my little happy places. That perfect pickup for Penguino. All right, we're almost at the end of this episode. Thank you so much for watching. But before we go, we got to do a final pup date because this is a very special episode because Brioche is turning 1. He is a 1-year-old pup and he's lived a wonderful year. So spoiled, so full of sleeps. He has so many sweaters that he's destroyed. He doesn't have any sweater that looks like a sweater anymore. So I need to like amp up my production because as soon as I make a sweater, he'll like wear it 3 times and then it's got all these holes and snags from his sister now. So maybe we need to felt you a sweater or knit you on something 0 needles so it's not so loose. But yeah, he's 1 year old. It's just the love of my life. I can't wait for every other year with him. And he's going to get lots of treats and lots of cuddles and lots of sweaters. So happy birthday, Brioche. May you live long and prosper. And yeah, I hope your sister doesn't annoy you too much. So thanks so much for watching. If you have any other questions, feel free to comment down below. And any updates on patterns and workshops, the best place to find that out is through the Westknits newsletter. And you can sign up for that at westknits.com. It's on the bottom of the homepage, westknits.com newsletter. And I'll see y'all in the next episode with more pup dates, more patterns, more whips, more snoozes. Okay, bye y'all.